Okay, so how many of you growing up wanted an arcade machine for your house? You wanted to have your favorite arcade machine in your home. It was every kid that grew up in the 80s and 90s, this was a dream of theirs. And back in the 80s, there was really sort of one way to do it. Who remembers the little Coleco handheld arcades? You remember these things?
Yeah.
Do you remember these things? I don't remember how many flavors these things came in, but they came in a variety of games. Obviously you had the Pac-Mans, you had the Donkey Kongs, the Miss Pac-Mans. These were actually made by Coleco. And then Coleco would then license the game from the developer. In this case, it was Midway, and in this case, it was Nintendo. These you don't run across them that often anymore. They also, like, over time, didn't hold up super well. But if you look closely, you're gonna notice that one of them is a little bit different. This one looks a little bit different, right? 2 of the joysticks, 1 joystick. That's because this is a Dr. Mod special.
It is.
If you remember the old Tiger handhelds, it was a predetermined map on the screen that would light up different areas of that map depending on what part of the game you were in. These things run very similar. It's the same sort of idea. You know, we got a little map on here and you could play a very rudimentary version of Pac-Man or Donkey Kong or Miss Pac-Man. But there was only one game.
Yep.
You had to choose the one game that you liked the best. And also it took like C batteries?
4 of them.
4 C-cell batteries. But you had a request from a viewer. One of you guys sent Dr. Mod kind of a crazy request, something you've never done before.
It was a mod I couldn't refuse.
It was a mod you couldn't refuse. Tell us about this mod. First off, what was this first request? What did they ask?
They messaged us, a man named Joey, was a viewer, a watcher of our show here, and he had this Donkey Kong Coleco Arcade.
So this was his? This
is his.
Okay.
Yep. And he wanted us to modernize it, to make it play a lot of games and to just be an updated version of, you know, its original version, and to restore it a little bit, make it look, you know, better again. It was a little rougher when we first got it. Some of the stickers were torn. I thought, you know, this is a pretty neat idea. You know, we've been working with those Raspberry Pis. We've done some videos on that, and I thought, you know, one of those would fit very nicely in this thing. And what if we made it portable? The other thing is, I wanted it to kind of look like a mini version of the actual arcade machine.
Yep.
So I wanted to give some, you know, pieces of the original arcade machine mixed with the Coleco version. And I wanted to put a marquee on it that lights up, you know, you kind of, these are just stickers on the originals. Yeah. Basically, when I make things, it's like, what would I want? What do I wish this thing would have been? You know, what this thing could be.
Your wildest dreams.
My wildest dreams.
I heard you say there's a Raspberry Pi in here.
It is.
Which Raspberry Pi is in there?
5.
A Raspberry Pi 5.
Yep.
If you're unfamiliar with the N64 Pi Mini video that we shot, you can see that here if you want to check it out. That little console has a Pi 5 in it.
It does.
And that runs what?
So it runs Batacera. That's the software we decided to load onto it because it's got a beautiful interface. You can customize it. But the thing about a Pi 5 compared to its predecessors is the Pi 5 is kind of energy hungry. Okay, yeah, it has a USB-C jack, but that's a 5-volt, 5-amp power supply. So that takes some serious juice compared to the other iterations of the Pi. So we needed to find something that would power it, and we ended up finding a great power supply module that we could use to run the Pi for several hours on battery power. And that's what we put in this. It has a battery indicator. Lets you know how much battery power you have.
I'm looking at that here on the back.
Yeah.
As far as what it can run, we have a ton of arcade games, and then NES, Super NES, N64,
yes,
Sega Master System,
yes,
Sega Mega Drive,
yes,
Genesis, Sega CD,
yes,
Sega CD, Sega 32X,
yes,
okay, Neo Geo,
yep,
Game Boy,
yep,
Game Boy Color,
yep,
Game Boy Advance.
yes.
What about stuff like Dreamcast?
Yes.
It runs Dreamcast games.
It runs Saturn.
It runs Sega Saturn games.
Well,
every Sega console
basically
can run on this thing.
Every Sega, even the Sega arcade machines.
Okay. One of my questions here is though, vertical display.
Yep.
How do you get around that?
I wanted it to have, you know, like I said, very similar elements to the original. So it has a vertical screen. It has a high resolution, very small IPS screen. And as you'll see in the front, I had put a plexiglass covering for there and tinted it so that it looked like the original Donkey Kong arcade machine, along with the artwork, the bezel around it. So I wanted to keep the elements of the original arcade machine there to blend in with the Coleco arcade. The other thing you'll notice is that it's got nice little buttons. I
was just gonna say, this has way more buttons than I remember.
It's got,
I see 4, well 5 including the on and off button. I see 5 buttons on the face, but then I also noticed this here.
Yeah, those are shoulder buttons.
We got shoulder buttons.
And trigger buttons, yeah.
Because it plays PlayStation 1?
Yes, it does.
It plays PSP?
Yes.
Okay, so you would need shoulder buttons.
You would need those. Yeah.
I also noticed buttons here on the front.
You got a start, select, and home button.
Start, select, and a USB port?
And a USB port. If you want to play with a friend on that tiny little screen, you can plug it in there. You can plug a controller in.
But I'm also noticing something else on the back here.
Yeah.
HDMI out?
Yes.
Okay, so just in case you don't want to play on the screen, you could set this thing down, plug it into your TV. Can you just plug a controller?
Yeah, you can just plug in a controller.
Controller into this?
Right into it. Or by Bluetooth.
Bluetooth.
Yep.
So you could just Bluetooth your controller into this, plug this thing into your TV, and it's essentially the N64 Pi Mini.
Yep, it's essentially like that, except it's portable. This you can take with you.
So you can actually, you can actually hold it
and play right
like
there.
this and just play.
You could. And then with a simple switch in the back here that I placed here, you can switch it to the TV and put some wireless controllers on it and play it on your big screen TV.
I think we should boot this thing up.
Yeah.
Should we boot this thing up?
Absolutely.
All right, let's boot this thing up and check it out.
So I put an on-off button. They're kind of similar, right in the place of where the original on-off switch was in this. So just one simple push and boom, arcade on.
Oh, we got a light up marquee.
Yeah, put a light up marquee on it.
That is not something that was on the original machine.
It was just a sticker, but I wanted it to light up. I thought
you wanted to make it an authentic experience here. All right, so you actually have made this thing quite literally a vertical display.
Yeah, to make it very similar to the original. And what's nice about the Badass Sarah menu is it's so customizable. I put a vertical game section.
All right, so walk us through everything that's on this thing.
We got all sorts of games on here.
Yep. All right, so we got arcade games, obviously. Light gun games, a collection of light gun games in case you want to get, your send-in on. A bunch of Capcom games. Okay.
More Capcom games.
And
more
even more
Capcom games.
Okay, so we got Atari. We got Atari, what is that, 7800? There we go. We got Atari Lynx. PC Engine, which is TurboGrafx, the NES, the Game Boy, Super Nintendo, N64, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, Mega Drive, Sega Game Gear, Sega CD, Sega Saturn, Sega 32X,
Sega arcade games,
bunch of Sega arcade games, Sega Dreamcast, PlayStation 1 games, PSP games. Wow.
Yeah, go ahead and pick
1942.
one. Okay, here it goes.
Sure.
Oh, best soundtrack of all time.
Yeah. And these are custom menus that you made too. Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we got some decent audio here from the speakers I put in this thing.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh, man, there's a great soundtrack. Then you want to go back, you just hit the select button. Boom, back to the menu.
Okay, so that's playing the machine as like a mini arcade. So what Coleco originally had intended back in the 80s, you have actually made
a modern version of it.
You fully realized it. Not only that, but you put in a light up marquee.
Yeah.
And you refurbished the machine as far as adding new original decals to it and stuff. Not to mention modifying the amount of buttons that are on this thing. And HDMI out.
Yeah.
If you don't want to play like that, you could totally plug this thing right on into your TV or your monitor or whatever and play on the TV.
Exactly.
And you have a massive selection of games to choose from. If you don't want to play just arcade games, you could go back through all the old console games. And to kind of clear things up, it is a vertical monitor in this thing, but if you played a game that wasn't in vertical, it just plays it in that portion of the screen.
It does.
Rechargeable batteries.
Yep.
What would you say the battery life is like on this thing?
With that very small screen, about 3.5 hours.
3.5 hours.
Yeah. It's got lithium batteries. And the cool thing is, where the old battery compartment was, it's still the battery compartment.
You've made it serviceable.
Yep, so if your batteries go bad, you can replace them.
All right.
But these are rechargeable.
All in all, I gotta say, I think Joey is going to be incredibly surprised and pleased with just exactly how this thing came out. What, just out of curiosity, it's an SD card that's in here?
It's got an SD card in it.
How big of an SD card is that?
It's got a 1 terabyte.
1 terabyte SD card. He did send along his original Coleco.
Yep.
What would you say hour-wise you put into this thing?
Oh, over 10 hours for sure.
10 hours.
It's about 2.5 weeks of regularly tinkering with it after work.
What was the one thing that you ran into that was just like, oh God, this is so frustrating on this thing? What was the most difficult portion of designing this thing?
Yeah, definitely putting all the buttons in.
Putting
putting the holes through them and just hoping I didn't destroy this thing.
Yeah, because you only got one shot.
Exactly.
It's not like you 3D printed this. This is Joey's original Coleco.
Yep.
That he trusted you with. God, I want to say 81 probably is when these came out.
82, I think.
There's probably
it was early
on
80s,
here.
yeah.
81.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. 81.
Look at that. And then you even went as far as to like 3D print the bezel outline.
I made a bezel and a marquee.
It's a lot of custom work.
Yeah. And luckily some people make some reproduction parts, so some of the stickers were a little rough, but we were able to get reproduction stickers for it. And just wanted to make it look like new again and play like new. So.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's the scariest part, is dealing with something that is a one-off. It's not the sort of thing you run into at the thrift store anymore like it used to be. These are pretty die-hard collectibles at this point, so you really don't want to mess something like this up.
No.
The outcome of this is just fantastic. I mean, really, the possibilities on stuff like this is sort of endless. Sure, I get it. You could run this whole thing on your PC, on your laptop, probably even modify your Steam Deck or your Ally or something, but the craftsmanship that goes into something like this is just really, really neat. And I think this is something that is really missing these days. I mean, especially if you have one of these things in your collection that might be broken. This is where we always say in these episodes, don't throw your stuff away. Always find another purpose for it.
What's old is new, you know? And
yes.
When you're making something like this, there's no like how-to instructions for something like this. This is completely like...
You're winging it.
Exactly. But that's part of the fun part when you're tinkering with things. It's just like getting things to work, you know, and experimenting. And, you know, that's why I really enjoyed this project. You know, like I said, you know, when he messaged us about this project, it was, you know, it was the mod I could refuse.
Yeah.
You know? It's like,
would you say that this was the most obscure thing you've been asked to do?
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's really neat.
I love it.
And again, repurposing old stuff like this from our childhood is really, really cool. Just look around your room, look around the stuff that is sitting in your collection, and think like, wow, you know what can be done with this? Mm-hmm. Those are the questions that I feel like aren't asked enough. And more often than not, something like this will get thrown away, and then there's less of them. And then the ones that are still around get really pricey and valuable. Yeah. And then everybody complains that old stuff is expensive. Don't throw it away and it won't be. It's not just about modding your Xbox or like shoving all the games you can onto one console so you don't have to pay for games. That's not what it's about. It's about preserving. It's about game preservation in general. That's what I love so much about all of this stuff. And to be frank, that's one of the things that kind of drew me to you when we first met to begin with. Well,
you know what I wanted out of this is, you know, because Joey entrusted me with this thing, and they're not cheap to begin with, you know, and so I really wanted it to be something where what would make it so that he would want to play it all the time, you know, like enjoy it. And so I wanted to do any type of cool feature I could add to it. I did.
Yeah.
I'm happy with the outcome, and I want one now for myself.
Yeah, I mean, you did a hell of a job. Yeah. You know, you can pick this thing up and it almost acts as a controller.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know how you did this or what you did here.
Yeah, isn't that smooth?
But this thumbstick is really smooth.
Yeah, so I 3D printed that myself. I made that myself, and I did a little bit of cutting and sanding and stuff like that to make everything fit there nicely. But yeah, it's completely custom.
It's so smooth. What kind of joystick? What joystick is
so
this?
Basically, I got a joystick kit that would interface with the buttons I had, which I was trying to reproduce the buttons to be very similar to the original buttons it had. And what's nice is they have that nice arcade button feel, but they're small enough to fit on the panel.
Yeah.
And then this is actually, it's pretty much the joystick for a controller, like a modern controller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so
Wow.
super smooth, you know, which
I
is
mean,
nice.
you really knocked it out of the park on that thing.
I just really want to thank Joey for the opportunity to work on his Donkey Kong
Yeah.
Arcade. It was
Trusting you with
Yeah.
a piece like that.
exactly, and I really enjoyed working on it and making this, and it kind of inspired me to make some other portable mods.
Other portable mods.
Yeah.
You don't say.
Yes. I know you
Hmm.
like those.
I love portable devices. And yes, thank you, Joey. If it were somebody that I didn't know, I would definitely have a hard time just like sending off a piece of my collection like this. So trusting us to do this sort of thing is really, really cool. We really appreciate the support. So if you want to know more about the little device that is inside of this thing, you should check out the N64 Pi Mini mod that Dr. Mod has put together. If you haven't seen that video yet, check that one out right here. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell icon to be notified when videos pop up like this in the future. Or join the Discord, because the Discord will tell you when YouTube has uploads as well. And I don't know, until then,